the story of the United States. We went through the Reconstruction, how um, that it was kind of a failure, right? In many ways, it was a failure. Isn't there a song that goes slip sliding away? Who knows the song? Slip sliding away, right? Trying to wake you guys up. The song goes, the closer you are to your destination, the more you slip sliding away. And that's just the story of humanity, right? You reach like the height, you reach the heights, and then you keep backsliding. And I think Reconstruction is a perfect example of that. Came so close, so close. And with the death of just one individual, I mean, who knows? We don't want to talk about counterfactuals too much because maybe Lincoln would have failed as well. Who knows, right? But because Lincoln disappeared and the worst, probably the worst president in the American history, in American history, Andrew Johnson, right? Um, Reconstruction largely failed. And then we talk about civil rights movement in the 20th century. Almost 100 years later, it started to bear some fruits. The Jim Crow, separate but equal. And then Martin Luther King Jr. Nobody's perfect, right? You can find faults with all of these heroes. Like we talk about Washington and Jefferson, American heroes, they were slave owners. Martin Luther King Jr., if you read enough about him, apparently he was a bit of a womanizer. Maybe not just a bit, he was maybe by a lot. Even like Mahatma Gandhi, some people say Mahatma Gandhi was like a child pedophile. You hear horror stories. Nobody's perfect, but we do want to identify certain individuals who um, who made a difference, right? Uh, right, JFK and Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy, he was sort of a romantic figure, and he died as well. So that's where we ended. The aftermath. Barack Obama. He's going to be remembered, I think, as one of those heroic figures as well. But who knows what history will have to say about Barack Obama? The guy's still young. Maybe there's another chapter for Barack Obama. So that is where we ended. So this is the third section of the story of the United States, America's place in world history. And you may have guessed this by now. I like the United States. One of the reasons why we took such a long time telling the story of the United States, and hopefully we'll get to maybe why that is. America's place in world history. So the United States, right from the beginning, had this tendency to oscillate like a pendulum, swinging to and fro, between isolationism and internationalism. It was there right from the start. George Washington, he said, our policy is to steer clear of entangling alliances. This was his advice uh, um, to the other political leaders. Avoid foreign entanglement. Let us be free of these entanglements of the old world. We are the new world. So that's definitely an isolationist statement. But then this guy, Woodrow Wilson, he mesmerized the world with his 14 points speech, the Wilsonian vision. It went viral. Basically, it went viral. Everyone wanted to be part of this vision, but it ended up producing the Treaty of Versailles, the Paris Conference. I think we talked about, I didn't go through the details, but it was such a vision, Wilsonian vision. Can he produce harmony of all the nations, the League of Nations? He won the Nobel Prize, by the way. I just realized. Yeah, so he won the Nobel Prize for this, but he was at the end, he again reached the heights, but at the end of the day, he ended up being a complete failure. I don't know if I said this, like in some ways he was a Southern gentleman, highly educated. He had his own, democratic vision and all that, but he was himself a racist man. He was a product of the racist South. Um, and in the end, he wanted the League of Nations, which was his baby, right? He was the one who pushed for the League of Nations. But in the end, he failed to even make the Congress pass um, the resolution for the United States to join the League of Nations. So we had this funny situation where Wilson couldn't even get the United States to join the League of Nations that he founded. Well, basically, he's the one who founded. Um, just skipping to World War II, uh, FDR. And then he died before the end. So Harry Truman took over, and he asserted what's come to be known as the Truman Doctrine, because as soon as World War II was over, right away the Cold War began. And so Truman Doctrine was to contain the communist menace, contain the dangers of communism. And in order to do that, we need to build a world order that is based on democracy and capitalism. And so part of that doctrine was for the United States to become the champion of liberty for the free Western nations and I mean, for the entire world, right? That was not under communist rule. And part of that was the Marshall Plan, which rebuilt Europe. His doctrine of containment, right? Containment. Um, they called it the Marshall Plan. Marshall was the general in charge of this whole project. They called it ERP, European Recovery Plan, I believe. European Recovery Plan, ERP. And I think I said in class, for many Europeans, this was their salvation, right? The United States poured billions of dollars um, rebuilding Europe. And I think I said it was a separate thing, but the United States rebuilt Japan as well, gave them billions of dollars. Um, did I say? I think I said this, right? Japan, it's so lucky. These guys, they got so lucky, right? They lose a war, and the winner, the winning nation decides to actually help them, not punish them. I mean, who does that? Like, who does that? You get into a fight, you beat up the other guy, and then you say, "Oh, let me help you recover." So, um, I think this is seen, even if you hate the United States, this area, this thing that the United States did, this is seen as one absolutely good thing, great thing that the United States did post Second World War. It rebuilt the world in its, if not in its own image, in the image of democracy and capitalism. JFK, this is early 60s, right? Part of his inaugural address. We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty. The United States was presenting itself as the champion of liberty. And this is where a little later on he says, "So, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." International organizations, the US led in the building of the present world order, the world order that is crumbling. Well, maybe not, it's not crumbling right now, but it's certainly shaken up, right? The present world order is shaken up. It is being shaken. So it's highly ironic that the country that is shaking the world order right now is the country that built it. These organizations like the World Bank, IMF, the United Nations, WHO, World Health Organization, NATO. Uh, NATO was an American thing, right? So for the United States now to turn around and say, we don't want to have anything to do with NATO. Well, they're not actually saying it, but uh, World Trade Organization, it was the United States that gently guided China to joining the WTO, right? It helped it, certainly. The US military is all over the place. Somebody said the United States has military presence in something like 800 different places around the world. They have army presence around 800 different places. It's connected to most parts of the world and the military alliance with NATO, but also with places like Japan, Korea, 18 countries in the Americas, India, Commonwealth countries. It has presence in 85 countries. Um, I don't think I have any picture of this, but apparently Korea is one of the uh, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, right? I don't, but I think Japan has like the most number of American soldiers. Japan has the most. And I think Korea is, no, it's Germany, Japan, Germany. And then I think Korea is number three. We actually have like the third largest American soldiers in our country. I mean, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We don't want to talk about, that kind of thing here, but the US is at the center of current world economy, science and technology, it's right at the center of that, especially with like AI. The global culture, certainly America's dominating Hollywood. Um, Madeleine Albright, I think she was the first female Secretary of State. And she said this, it's a bit shocking if you think about it now. If we have to use force, it is because we are America. We are the indispensable nation. We stand tall. We see further into the future. Oh, the hubris, the hubris. And she's, I think, also Jewish as well. The first woman Secretary of State. We have to use, right, the same thing. We stand tall. We see further into the future. We are the one indispensable nation. So that is the question we want to ask ourselves now. Is the United States the one indispensable nation? What is an indispensable nation? If you don't know, I mean, you should know. Dispensable means you can get rid of it, right? If, for example, Korea were to disappear, God forbid, right? God forbid. But entertain the thought that Korea could disappear from the face of this planet for some reason. The peninsula, there's an earthquake. The peninsula just goes down under the sea. Actually, Japan probably will, right? There's, but let's say Japan. I'm sorry. Let's not talk about. Let's say Japan all of a sudden sinks. The entire nation just disappears. Would that It would be tragic, but would that create chaos in the world? I suppose actually it would, right? But I think we can imagine a world without Japan. We can imagine a world without Korea. I mean, we can't imagine it, but I think the rest of the world could, right? One nation that, people think we cannot imagine the world without is the United States. If the United States were to disappear, what would happen to the world? Right, so that's the question. In the 90s, in the early days of after the post-Cold War, in the early days, everyone was happy. I think most people, maybe I shouldn't say everyone, most people were happy, and everyone acknowledged the United States as the sole superpower. And nobody got angry at that. I think everyone was just so happy that the Cold War was over without any nuclear holocaust, right? That was, I think, the best end that anybody could have dreamed of, how the Soviet Union would just sort of melt away. So everyone was happy. And then for about 80 years, this is starting from the end of World War II, right? Through the Cold War, post-Cold War, for about 80 years now, the world's economy grew under what we call the long peace, the peace of America, Pax Americana. And here's Mr. Donald Trump. He's saying, is that any longer worth shouldering? The idea here is the United States is shouldering like Atlas, the giant um, Titan, right? Atlas shouldering the planet. And here is China and Russia. They're saying, "Oh no, we'll take over. We'll take over. Just give it to us." Um, Post-war and during Cold War, the U.S. acted as the world's policeman. The rationale for that was we need somebody to be the policeman in order to maintain global order and stability and to promote democracy, fight communism, promote human rights. And of course, human rights, that was actually something that the United States failed at utterly, promoting human rights. And the criticism of the United States at this time is that the United States often acted like an empire and people who were being shoved around by the United States felt like it was neocolonialism, right? Not naked colonialism, but like neocolonialism. Uh, the current America First policies is worrisome. It's confused a lot of people, still confusing a lot of people who like the United States, who like the world just the way it is, because the United States is acting like a bully. But is there an alternative to the United States? What is the alternative to the United States? If it actually was, then what will happen? Of course, it's easy for us to say, I don't want to dwell on this too much because we had that story of science after this. I don't want to dwell on this too much. It's easy for us to say, we'll be fine. We'll be fine without the United States. Everyone just being good neighbors, right? I think they have a term for this. So unipolar and then bipolar. Bipolar was the United States and the Soviet Union. And now it's becoming maybe bipolar again because now it's United States and China. Some people talk about not unipolar, multipolar. Multipolar would be many nations asserting their weight, like Russia, China, United States, and the some of the like India would want to be part of that too. The BRIC nations, EU is certainly if it actually acts like a unit, EU would be one of them as well. Multipolar. Some people talk about what was that term? Having no polar, like no superpowers. Let's just everyone without any superpower, let us just live in peace. Uh, of course, that is a possibility. The only thing is that is highly, highly unlikely, right? If the United States were to disappear, someone else would start pushing other nations around. Might be most likely China or Russia. If it was a choice between China and the United States, who would you rather have as the world superpower? That would be the question, right? Uh, if it was a choice between Russia and China, I don't know. These are just open questions. Let me end with this. This guy named Ronald Reagan. I never liked him when he was president. And notice this is 1989 now. This is I was already in Korea by that time, by this time when Ronald Reagan was president. Uh, but he ended up being a pretty good president. He started out being this sort of like George W. Bush figure, kind of. Nothing like Mr. Trump, but he began as sort of like George W. Bush. And if you don't see the difference, brash, sort of Yankee, cowboyish American president representing the right wing, the conservatives, the religious movement. That was Ronald Reagan. But I think he became one of those individuals a leader who grew into his position, right? He grew into the job. And they said that's what happens with American presidency. No matter who gets elected, right? They grow into the job. And Ronald Reagan happened to be the president when the Soviet Union produced Gorbachev. I'm sorry, I don't want to talk about this now because we'll talk about this Thursday. So it was just, you could say, being in the right place at the right time, but he ended up being a good president at the end. But then they say at the end, he was suffering from Alzheimer's. So his mental capacity was kind of slipping as well. So the picture is never clean, right? The picture is always complicated. He when he was retiring, I mean, saying goodbye to this is in 1989, when he was saying goodbye to the nation, he made this farewell speech, and that speech is known as a shining city upon a hill because he he invoked this image of the United States as a shining city upon a hill. And people who like the United States, they look up to the United States using this imagery. It is a city, a shining city upon a hill. Where this imagery come from? It's a biblical imagery. He was a conservative Christian. The imagery of the shining city is this is from Matthew 5:14, the New Testament. Jesus is telling Christians, right? His disciples, ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. To shine your light, right? Don't be shy about your faith. Go out and share the good news, that kind of thing. You are the light of the world. So this has become, especially for the religious right, the conservatives, this has become the mindset of the right, the conservative part of the United States, that we are the light of the world. Manifest destiny, you could call it white man's burden, whatever it is, that the United States has a special place in history. God called the United States to save the world, right? That it is that shining city up on a hill. And so this is Ronald Reagan making this speech. This is toward the end. I think this is actually right at the end. This is how he ends his speech. I mean, he goes on about like all his accomplishments as two-term president, but toward the end, he gets really poetic. And I think this is a really, it's a beautiful image of, in his mind and in many people's minds, what the United States is all about. The shining city upon a hill. In my mind, he says, in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, wind-swept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds, all kinds, meaning all ethnicity, right? People of all kinds, living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it, and I see it still. And how stands the city? This is the way he talked, right? And how stands the city on this winter night? After 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true on the granite ridge. And her glow has held steady, no matter what storm. And she's still a beacon, still a magnet for all who must have freedom, for all who must have freedom, for all the pilgrims from all the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home. I'm just realized the mic is too loud. I mean, if you take his words at face value, right? If you take these words at face value, what is Ronald Reagan saying here? Remember, Alzheimer's, his mind was slipping, right? What is he saying here? She's still a beacon of light, a magnet, an attraction for all who must have freedom. All the pilgrims from the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home. The United States is home to anyone who wants the American way of life. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That is the promise of the United States. Of course, the picture we see of the United States these days is almost a total opposite of this, right? Uh, let me just switch to the next slide here. Hide this. I think I'll edit this part out of control. The picture we see of the United States is very different today. This was, I think this was end of last year. Yeah, I think this was the end of last year. I had a student who was telling me, oh, I'm going to go to the United States as an exchange student. And I think the first thing I ended up saying was, be careful, right? Be careful that you don't get arrested. Not the same country. So let me just check the time. I think I have just enough time to go through this. This is a lecture that I gave for the first time last term in another course that I teach. Shoot, what's the name of the course? Public speaking, science communication. And so I gave a few lectures on science, regarding science. And so this is based on that, the story of science. The story of science is part of world history. So I have 3 sections here. Just the origins, what it is, what science and technology is to humanity. And then the rise of modern science, this is specifically 17th and 18th century. This is where historians pinpoint, they call it scientific revolution. This is where this saw the birth of modern science. And then the third segment is Science Matters, just some scientific, some science topics. I think I have 3 of them. Hopefully I'll be able to cover everything. Science and technology, just brief definitions. Science, what is science? It means to know. From etymologically, science just means to know something. Systematic study of the physical world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories. That's known as the scientific method. Knowledge of any kind can be called science. You can even have like science of nail clipping or nail art science or tattoo, right? You could have science of tattooing. Like anything can be slapped with the word science. Technology means art and craft. I suppose just simplistically the know-how to do anything. That's a technique. Techne, that's where the word technology is from. The practical application of scientific knowledge, create tools, systems, processes to solve problems or to improve one's quality of life. Using tools and knowledge to solve problems or to make tasks easier. So these are the basic definitions of science and technology. Obviously, this is just something you don't have to study, right? Science gets into humanities as well. Like everything is scientific now. Even something like English literature, right, has become more scientific, more systematic in the way we study literature. Engineering, say medical science, natural sciences, or pure sciences, I suppose, right? Social sciences. And this is, or agricultural. Wasn't there like an applied, or engineering, right? Engineering, that would be like applied science. Science is everywhere. The general meaning of science and technology is already baked, we say, baked into the definition of human beings. Human beings are not separate from science and technology. Even the word, the scientific definition of human, what human species is, we are Homo sapiens sapiens. We don't say sapiens sapiens anymore, but we are Homo sapiens. What does that mean? We are wise humans. We're not just humanoid. We are wise humans. What does it mean to be wise? Wise means the ability to use knowledge to have good judgment and having the capability to practically apply your knowledge. That's technology, right? So science and technology is baked into the definition. I'm pushing things a little bit. I'm pushing, I know I'm pushing things a little bit, but it is part of, almost part of the definition of being human. It's just evolution. We are different from chimpanzees, apes, because we have larger brains. We have the ability to use, to be more knowledgeable and use our knowledge to become, we became the apex predators with fire, clubs, spears, bows, and arrows. We became the top predators of this planet. So I'm going to go through these things dramatically. Let me start by showing you this. So this isn't anything in the slides now, just so you can focus on the screen. This is from a movie. It's one of my favorite movies. It's called Space Odyssey 2001. The movie was released in 1968. And I remember that year because, I mean, I'm not that old, right? I wasn't like, I didn't see the movie when it came out. It's not like that, but I remember the date because this was a year before Apollo's moon landing, right? But it's a great movie. It starts with this sort of proto-human ape-like creature. And in the movie, this thing that changes in the ape, it was given by some alien race, but forget the aliens, just the picture of it. This proto-human being learning how to use tools. And the tool is, I guess this is a bone, piece of bone. And it learns to use this bone to kill its enemies. And then the movie jumps something like 4,000 years. No, I'm sorry, 4 million years. The movie, the ape throws the bone into the air, and then there's a sort of a transition. It's a great transitional cut. This bone that is thrown into the air turns into this spaceship. It's like 4 million years later. The year is 2001. And in 2001, this is Kubrick, right? Kubrick's movie. This is the world that we are imagining now. We have this space station. There's artificial gravity. We're not there yet, right? But we have our own space station now. This is the International Space Station. And in the movie, 2001, oh, I'm sorry, 2001, A Space Odyssey. I had the other way around. In the movie, there's this villain. The villain is artificial intelligence, HAL 9000. He becomes the movie's villain, warning us of the dangers of artificial intelligence. I wish I could talk about artificial intelligence today, but I think for us to talk about artificial intelligence, I think we'll go way over time. So I chose not to talk about this, which is too bad. But in the movie, this is a villain, HAL 9000. In the movie as well, there's a character that appears at the end of the movie. This child in this sort of bubble, bubble protecting the child. Child is in outer space. And this child is called the Star Child, sort of a godlike figure, a human being. The astronaut who is the protagonist of the movie, the human being transforms into this Star Child. And this Star Child is looking at the planet. And the audience is left wondering, what is going to happen next? The Star Child. Will the Star Child come to our planet and save it? This is how the movie ends. Going back to the origins of science and technology, we have the story of the fire. Human beings learned how to tame fire, right? This is the Greek mythology of that story. This is Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, because Prometheus created human beings, and he wanted human beings to use fire to help them with their life, their living. That mythology of human beings learning how to use fire. Fire in its different forms has always been part of human history. I mean, even nowadays, when we fire these rockets, cannons, It's a kind of firepower, right? We say this is a firepower. We exported nuclear bombs. That is a kind of firepower, right? This is a hydrogen bomb. This is the power of the sun, just like the mythology, right? Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, and there's sun, the symbolic sun. We have harnessed firepower of the sun, and nowadays we have the power of fusion energy. It is still science fiction-y, but it's at the cusp of becoming reality, right? Once we learn how to use fusion energy, really be able to control fusion energy, they say our world is going to change. Something new under the sun. We'll have an almost unlimited amount of energy, clean energy. It's going to change everything, so they say. Tools, human beings learn how to use tools to hunt together and lay traps. With these tools, human beings became the apex predator, especially once human beings learned how to use bow and arrow. I think that was a sort of a qualitative jump in the use of technology. Because if you had like a sword or a spear, you still have to get close to the animal you're fighting, right? You have to still stab it and fight it. Still dangerous. But if you have an arrow, no matter how strong, how powerful the animal is, you shoot it from like 20 meters away, 50 meters away, there's no contest, right? The animal can't even run away now, right? At least if a lion is chasing you, right? You try to run like hell, right? And try to escape from the lion. How do you escape from an arrow? From a distance. You don't even hear it coming. Or maybe you hear it and then you're dead. It was seen as something godlike, right? Apollo, or many Greek gods had, I guess, symbolically arrows that they could shoot. And I'm just skipping centuries now. Uh, I used this picture for the first Opium War. This was the beginning of China's 1 century of humiliation. And the only reason that this happened was because China lagged behind the West in terms of science and technology, right? So when we talk about how China seems to be so militant, people criticize China these days, right? They're building up their military, they're building up their Navy, the Air Force. What are they doing, right? Why are they being so militant? It's because they say, uh, I, this guy who's an expert on China, so he's a Chinese scholar on Chinese. He said in this interview, if you go to China and actually talk to people in China, right? This is the first thing on their mind when you talk to them, right? They say, never again. Never again will we have this century of humiliation. And so as far as they're concerned, this is a picture of these aircraft carriers. One of the reasons why they're spending money on building up their military is because they never want this kind of thing to happen again. But of course, this guy was saying, if you look at the situation objectively, we talk about China being militaristic. They are nothing compared to how the United States is militaristic, right? In terms of the money that they're spending, it's nothing like the United States. Agriculture, that is yet another example of science and technology. Around 10,000 years ago, most societies were agricultural by 5,000. And the cities that got built, the beginning of civilization at the Fertile Crescent, all these are signatures of science and technology. I'm not going to go through these things again. We went through them already. I mean, if you look at this is a reconstructed version of Uruk, right, the largest city. This is, at the time, this was a wondrous, miraculous thing that was built using science and technology of its times. I'm just going to skip that Gilgamesh here. So that's the origin, how science and technology has always been with us. I'm going to skip to well, this is really 17th, 18th century, but it began in the 16th century, the rise of modern science. Here's just a brief background, the medieval background before the rise of modern science. Europe was being dominated by scholar. I'm having a hard time pronouncing this word right now. Scholasticism. That's how you say it, scholasticism. There you go. Scholasticism. This was a combination of church doctrines plus Aristotelianism, and it really was the top level of science during this time. Scholasticism was what the most brilliant minds learned during the medieval times. This was dominant view. Everyone believed in geocentrism, that the earth was at the center, and human beings were just below the angels and far above the animals in a hierarchical universe created by God that's come to be known today. Back then they didn't call it this, but today we call this kind of view of reality the great chain of being, with God at the top and then angels and the human beings, animals. Here's a picture of that. This is what people believe. You have inanimate matter, fire is just above, and then you have plant life, animal life, lion at the top. Human beings are above the animals, just below the angels. And then there's like hierarchy of angels, archangels, and then the kingdom of God with God at the top. The great chain of being. This was the background. Then Europe slowly transitioned to Renaissance, rebirth, and then that led to the Age of Reason and to the Age of Enlightenment. This is when modern science was born. We call it scientific revolution. I think I listed this as one of the dates, right? I don't know if I have it in blue, but this is when science began. I mean, the modern science officially started 1543. Why is it 1543? That is when Copernicus published his heliocentric view of the solar system. So historians, they point to that as, yeah, that's when modern science began, modern science, 1543. But they also point to, this is less well known, this man named Andreas Vesalius. He published his Observations of Human Anatomy in 1543. The story, this is a page from that, very detailed pictures. Apparently the story is he dug up bodies and then he would dissect these bodies to, draw pictures, anatomical pictures. So, but Copernicus, that's the big thing. That is the beginning of the scientific revolution. Just many big things happened, but let me just talk about Descartes, because his contribution was very significant during this time. He proposed what's known as Cartesian dualism, that the world is divided between the physical and the mental. So this became the dominant view for quite a while, Cartesian dualism, especially because it combined with religious belief. Of course, we are spiritual creatures. My soul, it's an immaterial thing, even though we live in a physical universe, this physical universe. So Cartesian dualism also began this debate in science between mechanism and vitalism. So this was a big debate that continued starting from Descartes' time. And this debate continued, I think, well into the 20th century. So this debate continued for centuries. What is this debate? Mechanism versus vitalism, debate about what life is. What life is. And it dealt with chemistry and biology. Vitalism said life is distinct from chemical and physical forces, sort of like the Aristotle's soul as the animating force. So if you know anything about Aristotelian metaphysics, Aristotle said anima, the soul, the form, is what gives matter life. So this is vitalism. And mechanist view of life, said life is just chemistry, just a biochemical mechanism. It's mechanistic. So these two views, they went back and forth for centuries, but the debate ended in the 20th century. In the science community, If you are a scientist today, you are a mechanist. I don't think there's any scientist, any biologist today who is a vitalist. Vitalism is considered pseudoscience, but vitalism is still popular in the popular consciousness, even today. When we uh, say things like chi or ki or chakra, that's the Indian equivalent, or you buy into something like this Star Wars, may the force be with you. That's all vitalism. This is a version of vitalism that we believe that this life force, separate from my physical body, right? It controls my life energy. Or if you do like yoga, the chakra, not chakra, right? Chakra, I think they call it, this life energy. Like you do yoga, you do meditation, and that's how you become, I don't know, godlike. But this is considered pseudoscience. What science tells us now is everything is mechanistic. Cell or organelles, if you look into cells, scientists, they can look very clearly into the cell now. The cell, the basic unit of life, is just a factory. It's just a chemical factory. So that was a debate that started in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, well into the 20th century, and mechanism came out victorious. People say Newton's publication of Principia, that was 1687, that was sort of a culmination of the scientific revolution. So they mark 1687 as the end of the scientific revolution. That's when the revolution ended. Because with Principia, if you don't know already, Newton's Principia is where he talked about gravity, where he presented his theory of gravity. Why is that so significant? They say with that one law, physics law, he united heaven and earth. Before then, people thought of heaven, the heavens, as the realm of God and angels, the perfect world of heavens. But with the theory of gravity, people began to see the world as just one place. The earth and the heavens were all part of the universe. So that is the rise of modern science. I'm just, I'm sorry, I'm not talking about Darwin here, but Darwinian theory of evolution was another very significant part of the story of science, and we just don't have time to talk about this. This happened in the 19th century, but we're just skipping it and going to science matters. I'm going to talk about three things. So we told the story of science, the origins, and then the rise of modern science that happened in the 17th, 18th century. Right, 1687, that's 17th century, sorry. So I should have said 16th, 17th century, sorry. This is just me selecting three science matters to talk about as part of the story of science. One is, and I think this is almost trivial now because people mostly agree with this. I call this Carl Sagan's great demotions. Carl Sagan was an astronomer who promoted this argument that he called great demotions. Demotion means we are constantly being demoted. We human beings used to have such a high view of who we are. We thought we were at the center of the universe, right? We were just a little below the angels, but far above the animals because they don't have souls. But we were made in the image of God. We are at the center of the universe. And that is being very human-centric, being very human-centered. And Carl Sagan said, reality isn't like that. Science keeps telling us that we are not at the center of things. So he calls this the idea of great demotions. Carl Sagan, if you don't know who he is a US American astronomer, Cornell professor, science communicator. He became really famous with this TV series, and it wasn't like a long series. I think he only had like 12 or 13 episodes. But his Cosmos became incredibly popular, became internationally known because of this. He popularized the idea of great emotions, that science has repeatedly displaced us from our imagined center of importance. We thought we were at the center, the Earth was at the center, but Copernican revolution showed the Earth is not at the center of anything, just a planet orbiting the sun. Is the sun at the center of anything? And then science, astronomy discovered that the sun is not at the center of anything. We are, even in terms of our Milky Way galaxy, we are apparently at one of the peripheral spirals. We're not even at the center of our galaxy. We're not at the center of anything. In terms of species, Darwin's theory of evolution showed that we human beings descended from animals. We are part of a continuum of life on Earth. We are not special, right? We are just at the top. We just became the apex predator. But this long chain of life that started billions of years ago, we are just a part of that nature. It is what Carl Sagan says. Of course, if any of you are, because I don't want to offend anybody, right? If any of you think, God created us from dust, clay, like Adam and Eve, if you believe that is actually how human beings came to be, then you wouldn't like what Carl Sagan says, right? But this is just a Darwinian theory of evolution. He gave this lecture. This is before 1994. He gave this lecture where he talks about the pale blue dot. Who's heard of the pale blue dot? Raise your hand if you know what pale blue dot is. Just one person. Seriously, nobody else? Oh, one other person. Good for you. Good for you, because you were in that science communication class. Nobody else knows what the pale blue dot is. It's a pretty famous image that Carl Sagan used to talk about our planet. And I want to show you the video. It's like 3 minutes. This is the pale blue dot that he's talking about. This is the Voyager spacecraft. And this was, I think at this time, it was passing through Jupiter, I think, Jupiter. And Carl Sagan asked NASA to turn the camera around so that it would point toward Earth and take a picture of it. So this is the picture of the Earth that Voyager took. And that little dot, he said, that little dot is barely a pixel. That pale bluish dot, that is us. That is our planet. And so this is him talking about us, pale blue dot. Let me just show you the video. Hopefully that's the only. No, there's another one. Get it.
Take a look. It's a pale blue dot. That's us. That's home. That's where we are. On it, everybody you love, everybody you know, everybody you ever heard of, lived out their days there. The aggregate of all our joy and suffering, thousands of confident ideologies, religions, economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilizations, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every hopeful child, every mother and father, every inventor and explorer, every revered teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every uncorrupt politician too, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there. The Earth is a very small stage in a great cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, presidents and prime ministers, party leaders, so that in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of the corner of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one part of the dot on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of another part of the dot. How frequent their misunderstanding, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe seem to me challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark, in our obscurity, in all this vastness. There is no hint that there's anyone who will come and save us from ourselves. That will happen only if we do it.
That was the end of his speech. Carl Sagan talking about was that pale blue? He didn't say pale blue dot, right? A pale point of light is what he said. Let me get back to, right. So that's the pale blue dot. And it became sort of a, what do you call it, like an internet meme kind of thing. Pale blue dot. That is us. That. All the blood spilled. So Carl Sagan constantly promoted this idea that we're not special. Human beings are not special, right? And we're fighting and arguing, killing one another, and it's just a small little speck of, like a speck of dust. It's cosmic arena, I said. The other, so that's one science topic that I wanted to share with you. The other topic is the opposite direction. It's called the ascent of humanity, ascent of humanity. So if someone like Carl Sagan, his life's purpose was to tell us that we're not special, right? We're just part of this, ordinary, small ordinary planet orbiting an ordinary star. This second idea is that human beings are actually quite special. Human beings are not ordinary. This is the ascent of humanity. I think this phrase is supposed to be in contrast to the descent of man. It's not the origin of species. It's the other book that Darwin published when he talked about how human beings came to be descended from the apes. This is by Jacob Bronowski, The Ascent of Man, way back in 1973. He said, we are nature's unique experiment. We human beings are nature's unique experiment with rational intelligence, and that knowledge is our destiny. The ascent of man. We have ascended to become not just figures in the landscape, but a shaper of the landscape. We have begun to shape the world we're living in. And that idea is called Anthropocene. Anthropocene. This is the age of man. Age of human beings. They usually talk about starting from the Industrial Revolution, the age of Industrial Revolution. So this is a geological period where we have become the dominant influence shaping the earth. They generally view Anthropocene as starting with the Industrial Revolution. Some scholars would say it really began with agriculture, because with the agricultural revolution, human beings began to shape the world around them like no animals ever had before. But the general consensus is starting from the Industrial Revolution. But we have done a lot of bad things, right, in our shaping of the planet, pollution, climate change. And the question from this kind of thought, if we are ascending, stepping up from the nature that's around us, where are we going? Where are we ascending to? So it's just a question. I don't have any answers here. So we call this the Anthropocene. Apparently, some scientists push geologists to adopt this as an official geological term, and some geological organization turned this down. Not because they didn't believe in Anthropocene, they just said the time period is too small, it's too brief, right? So we're talking about maybe a couple of 100 years, 100 years, couple of 100 years, less than 100, couple of 100 years, right? 18, right? So it's less than 200 years. They're saying we geologists, we deal with like billions of years, millions of years, right? So this is way too short to be an official term for geological term. But maybe one day in the future, they'll adopt this as an official geological term, Anthropocene. I'm just going to go through these. Yeah, we can annihilate ourselves, annihilate all life on the planet if we wanted to, right? Here's an example of deforestation. I believe this, if I remember, I believe this is the Amazonian jungle. They cleared like this plot of land to do farming, I think, after that. Of course, we all know about plastic pollution. Climate change, we talk about climate change, how that is part of the Anthropocene. I don't think any of us here deny climate change, right? Some people do, especially in the United States. But that is the Anthropocene. Let me just check the time. 5 minutes. Let me just quickly go through this. The third issue, and this thing I want to end the story of science with, and yeah, I'm glad I didn't include AI because only 5 minutes left. So let me quickly go through this. Biotechnology is a fascinating part of the story of science because biotechnology has to do with life. What is life? I'm sorry. What is life and what can we do with life? That's what biotechnology is about. As we gain more and more knowledge about life, bio is life, what can we do with it? Technology. And this is both incredibly exciting and terrifying at the same time. These days, we call this biotechnology. The term that's in vogue these days is synthetic biology. We can artificially create different life forms, how to design different life forms. So biotechnology is basically biology plus technology to solve problems, make useful products. And this thing that happened, this is only about 12, right? 2012, only 14 years ago. This thing called CRISPR. I'm sure most of you know what CRISPR is, right? It's developed by these two lady scientists, and they won a Nobel Prize in chemistry, not Peace Prize. So this is only 4 years ago that they were awarded the Nobel Prize for the development of a method for genome editing, it says, genome editing. CRISPR, if you don't know, is basically a technology to edit genes. And genes are the code of life, right? So with this technology, I mean, it's almost brand new still. It's only been 14 years, and yet so much has happened in the past 14 years that it's awesome. It's awe-inspiring how quickly biotechnology is developing these days. So what they say is we can now rewrite the code of life. Until CRISPR, technology like CRISPR, we could only read. It was read only, the code of life, all the genetic information. We could only read it and then try to edit it by making animals breed, right? Breeding technology from like wolves to dogs, breeding better types of animals, better types of plants. We could only do it, I guess, suppose, quote, naturally, but now we can do it more scientifically using computers. The promise of biotechnology is that all our problems that we have today, like health problems, food scarcity, environmental pollution, all these problems can be solved with biotechnology by utilizing what they call evolution by design. Some areas of biotechnology, we don't have time for this, but it's amazing how quickly the field of biotechnology is developing because of this one technique, learning how to edit genes. So biotechnology regarding animals and plants, there's no problem with that. Everybody accepts it as a great thing. But regarding editing human genes, it's still highly controversial. They distinguish this thing called somatic editing and germline editing. Let me just show you what that is. Somatic editing is regular, and even this is highly restricted, I believe. You edit human genes to cure diseases. One of the most famous examples of that somatic gene editing is sickle cell disease. Sickle cell is this sort of genetic disease. So you introduce healthy cells into the body, and then sickle cell disappears. Diseased cells disappear. So this is allowed. What's called germline gene editing is right now sort of a taboo. It's not officially illegal or criminal to edit germline genes, but the fear is we mustn't touch human beings, germline human genes. If I edit my germline genes so that I will have blue eyes, then maybe my children will have blue eyes. If I edit my genes so that I will grow to be like 8 feet tall, then all my children will be tall like me. So that's germline editing. Right now, people are saying this is taboo. We must not do this. This is a picture of a scientist, Chinese scientist. This is like years ago now already, 2019, 7 years ago. He was actually arrested and he went to jail because he secretly edited human genes. And he produced, I believe, 2 sisters who were, so they're genetically modified human beings. They're living somewhere in China right now. There may be 2 of them, there may be 3 of them. So we already have genetically modified human beings in China somewhere, somehow. And I'm sure the government is keeping track of them. We just don't know because the privacy, right? We want to give them privacy to live their own normal lives, but they're genetically modified human beings. The question is, and people think this is inevitable, right? Question is, why not edit human genes? That's the big question. Why should we not edit human genes? There's no scientific reason as to why we shouldn't. The technology is already there, already applied for plants and animals, right? We are already editing the genes of animals. Are we human beings not anything different? So this is a cover. This is years ago now. The Economist, editing humanity. We can make human beings stronger, perfect pitch, no baldness, incredibly high IQ, no genetic diseases. We could get rid of 20/20 vision. Nobody has to wear glasses. Designer babies is what we're talking about. Oh, we're out of time. So the rest, I'm just going to skip the rest because we're out of time. So that is, I guess I talk about this just to like imagine how the story of science, or I guess I should say, where the story of science is leading us, right? The future of humanity, I think, depends on where science goes. We will continue. Our last lecture is Thursday. Please be here or be square. Be here, be square. Have a wonderful day, everyone.